awareness. And now we would like to move on to autism acceptance. So, and many people say, okay, we're aware. We know that children on the spectrum exist, but do you accept them, their differences? Okay, so a lot of people, oh, we probably need to cure them, but do we need to cure them or do we need to teach them how to adapt? So we would get into what ABA is, what is behavior, and then I was given some questions, so we'll try to address some of the questions you would have had from the last workshop you had for practical tips on how to work with children on the spectrum. Okay? Okay, so we'll go on now to the next one. So understanding ABA, and again, it's supporting the children that we're working with. And I like to, when I talk to people, I like to tell them about the next slide, please. Yeah, about this slide here. Do the children that we work with, do they consider us their best friend? And there's a story to this picture here. I worked with a little girl at a school, and so she needed a break. So, and I know she loved Dora. So I said to her, go ahead, draw your best friend. So she went ahead and she drew her with her best friend. So the big picture you see on the screen, the big person with the little tuft of hair, that was me. I had a mohawk then, so that's her best. And oh, I kept the picture. And even you see the little blue to the bottom, the body. That day she drew us, I had on a blue shirt and a pair of blue jeans. And she had her yellow pea uniform on, so you see it in the picture. So that's the point to where we want to get to, that when we work with the children, when we ask them, draw your best friend, or who's your best friend, you would want them to think that, you know, we're their best friend or we're their friends, okay? So that's the point we want to get to, so that when we ask them to draw again, that we are in the picture that they draw. Okay, so we're gonna go on to the next one. So now, what is ABA? So there's been a lot of talk, you know, when you have children who have been diagnosed with ABA, a lot of you are aware of speech, you are aware of occupational therapy, but what is ABA? So ABA is a therapy, and it helps to improve the social, communication, and learning skills. And we use reinforcement strategies. So the A is applied. So we're using the principles of experimental analysis of behavior, and we take it and we apply it in the real world. Okay, so that's the applied. Sitting down to eat might be a socially significant behavior to one family, or just asking to use the bathroom could be a socially significant behavior for another child. So we will have to figure out what needs to be done to address those socially significant behaviors, okay? And then the behavior. When we talk about behavior, we're looking at things that we can see. So for teachers, Sabbath school teachers or educators, we would look for, you know, are they getting up out of their seat? So those are observable behaviors, things that we can see. Are they talking? Are they crying? Are they able to ask for things? So those are the behaviors we would look for. And then the analysis comes. The analysis comes when we look for variables within the environment to help address these socially significant behaviors. So are we okay so far? Okay, good. So we'll go on to the next one. We're there? Okay, good. So again, I mentioned to you the experimental analysis of behavior. So that is the basis of where we use our applied skills. And the experimentation usually happens in a lab, And for the most part, they use non-humans. So it could be pigeons. And if you notice in the little box there, I have a pigeon in the box that's called a Skinner box. And what he did was he observed the behaviors and he manipulated certain things in the environment. And from there, he was able to say, okay, let's apply this and see if it works with humans. And so that's where we formed the foundation of applied behavior analysis. And he was able to make those associations on human behavior that he did with non-humans, okay? And mostly he used either rats or pigeons to form those relationships. Okay, so now we're on what is behavior. So behavior is our interaction with the environment. So I can ask you now, are you behaving? Are we all behaving? No? Okay, so we're all behaving, okay? So are we now the question then becomes, are we behaving appropriately? Okay, so if we did not have any chairs, and I said, okay, go and sit in the chair. Can you sit in the chair if it's not there? Okay, so we have chairs, and the expectation is that we would sit, and we would pay attention, and you would, if you have questions, you can ask me, or if I say, okay, does anybody have a question? You know, the appropriate response would be to hold up your hand and ask your question. Okay, so behavior is our interaction with the environment. So, and the thing is, we're all part of the environment. So we're all interacting, and whether or not we realize it, we're all interacting with each other. Okay, so that's what it is. Okay, and so behavior. So, and Skinner said that, you know what, and this is what we call radical behaviorism. Skinner said that, you know what, thinking is behavior, and feeling is behavior. So behavior is what people do and what people say. And those things that you and I cannot observe, we call them private events. But that doesn't mean that what we cannot see doesn't have an effect on behavior. Because, you know, if a child is hungry, that affects behavior. So if they're sleepy, right? She said it. So yeah, sometimes if they're sleepy, it affects behavior. So whether we can see it or not, sometimes there are things that are affecting behavior and we don't realize that this is what's happening, okay? So we got to keep that in mind when we're saying, I don't know why this child doesn't sit down or whatever. We need to find out what's going on. You know, maybe he, you know, might have something going on that we don't see, and that's why he wouldn't sit down. Or, you know, he keeps taking off his shoes. Maybe his shoes might not be comfortable. Maybe there's a rock in his shoe. So that's what we have to take into consideration sometimes. Okay, so we're gonna go on to the next one. Okay, so now we know what behavior is. Any questions about what behavior is? No? Okay. So now we're going to address the functions of behavior, or why we behave. Okay? So there are 4 functions: to escape something. So that means we're trying to avoid or get away from something that is unpleasant. Attention. So we're trying to get the attention of other people, whether it's positive attention or negative attention. If the behavior is maintained by attention, still attention. Okay? Something tangible. So if you want something, if you want a toy, or you want food, or it's whatever it is that you can hold, that's something tangible. And so that's why we behave in such a way. We behave to get what we want. So if a child cries, maybe they want some milk, maybe they want a toy, so that's something tangible. For sensory reasons, okay, to get or avoid certain stimulation. So, a lot of children on the spectrum, they have sensory issues, and so they would, you'd see them rock, maybe to soothe themselves, or they would play with their fingers when they're anxious, or they would flap, and we don't understand why. So it could be something sensory that's going on, and they do that to soothe themselves, to calm themselves. Maybe they're feeling anxious, okay? And so I have some examples here. So to escape something, maybe the child doesn't want to sit down in class. So they act up. Once they act up, you say, okay, go to the principal's office, go outside, take a break or whatever. So they're trying to avoid classwork. Maybe they don't want to do any classwork today. And so they're going to act up to escape having to write or having to do any classwork. For attention, I'm going to act up because I want my friend's attention or the teacher's attention. So that's why they would behave. Okay? And we'll come to that. But once we find out why they're behaving the way they're behaving, then we try to find a replacement behavior that's appropriate. And the key word here is appropriate, to replace certain inappropriate behaviors. Okay? So everybody good with that? Everybody understands? Okay. The next one. Okay, and when behavior analyst talks about behavior, you would hear them talk about ABC. So, and that's a contingency or the order sometimes in which, a behavior, the chain of behaviors happen. So the A in the contingency or the model of behavior is something that happens before. So I can ask a child to sit down. I can ask a child to write. And so that comes before. And when I ask them this, they cry. They have a tantrum. So that's the B. That's what I can see. Okay? So that's the B in the model of behavior. So what comes before, that's the antecedent. The B is the behavior. And then C is the consequence. What happens immediately after the behavior? And it's immediately, okay? So if a child does something now, and 10 minutes later you decide that there would be consequences, then it doesn't necessarily maintain a particular behavior, okay? So if the consequences isn't immediate, sometimes it does not have an effect on a behavior. Or if the consequence isn't immediate, then the child might think, okay, my behavior I might be reinforcing another behavior other than the one that happened 10 minutes before. So we have to be careful. So if a child falls to the ground and you, once they get up, by fall to the ground, I mean having a tantrum, because when they flop to the ground, I'm sorry, okay. So if they have a tantrum and flop to the ground, right? And the consequences is, you would say to them, you would redirect. Okay, so you redirect immediately. You don't wait 10 minutes later to say, okay, I need you to get up and go and sit down. You want to do it immediately, otherwise the child could be playing then. And so why am I being punished for playing if you didn't ask them to do it immediately, to get up and go sit down or do something else, okay? So it has to be immediate. Sure. Hold on one second. She'll get another mic for you so everybody could hear your question, okay?
I wanted to ask, do you give them chances? Because sometimes they say, as a teacher, you have to give them verbal, and then after the verbal, then you put them in the corner and you don't do it right away.
But what is the
At least
verb?
that's verbal.
See, that depends too. Remember I told you on the function of the behavior? So that depends on why he's doing what he's doing. Okay?
Because he
Hold on,
does
wait
it.
1 second. Hold on. Okay, wait, yes, wait 1 second, please. Okay, sorry.
Yes, I'm with this.
Hold on. Wait, Cindy, she didn't finish her question. Yes. You're done?
I'm still asking.
Did everybody hear her question? Okay, so let's go.
I was stating that as a teacher, we go through different protocols. First, we give them a verbal, and then you would say, Johnny, do not do that. And then they will sit down. And then afterwards, we would thought that, we probably put them in the corner. But I have a little boy that does this. He annoys the children, and sometimes it flips out of there. And I would give him three chances. But now you're telling me that I should do something, do it immediately. I say that accounts for why he keeps doing it, because I would give him 3 chances and he would still go ahead and do the same thing, even though I would put him in the corner or put him out for timeout. Because the first time I don't do anything about it, I'll just give him a verbal warning. So is there anything else that we can do as teachers to?
Okay, so remember, I just explained to you the function of behavior. And so, yes, you can have, the verbal warning, the timeout, all of this. But why is this particular child doing this? So it becomes, what's the function? Am I doing it for the teacher's attention? Am I doing it for my friend's attention? Whether I annoy them or not, it doesn't matter to me. I just have their attention. Okay? And then we'll get to it, but anytime you said that this is a punishment, I'm going to put punishment in quotes. Anytime you refer to something as a punishment, but the behavior is not going down, it's not punishment.
Because what I would normally have to do is say, I'm going to call your dad. And he'd be like, don't call dad.
Okay, so you see the difference? Okay. And then you said that you would usually put them on a timeout.
Yeah.
So again, the function of the behavior. So the timeout, listen, if I'm on timeout and I don't have to do no work, guess what I'm doing? Guess what?
Yes, he does. He continues doing it.
Go.
The only
And
way
so-
he would stop if I
Mhm.
said, oh, I'm going to go on the phone and I'm going to call your dad. He said, oh, no, Miss Stevens. Call daddy? No, please don't. I will be late. I will sit down.
Okay.
So,
And so that's another thing too. But we'll talk about that because that's instructional control. So that means if you have to call somebody else to deal with a child that you're working with, now do you really have instructional control? If somebody else has to deal with them, you understand? Okay. So yeah. So that's what you. Yes. You have another question.
Yes, piggybacking on what she said.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's on.
Oh, it's up.
Yeah.
All right, so we have a child who has this behavior. How do we know what is inside the child that triggered this behavior? Should we react right away? Or you said not to wait?
Okay, so let me tell you, let's go on to something else first because let's go on first and then I'll come back to what you just asked. So now remember your question and then I'll come back to you, okay? So let's skip on. So antecedents, what comes before, so it could be a transition, it could be a demand, some instruction given. So it could be a number of things. You can ask a question. So it could be any number of things that comes before a particular behavior. So let's go on then. Let's go on. So, so we talked about consequences. We're going to talk. There are 4 types of behavior consequences. Positive reinforcement. That means you're adding something now. Some of you came a little early, and you got a sticker. Did anybody get a sticker and a pencil? Okay, because she was the first one. Okay, so now, when on the off chance that I would ever speak again, I have just reinforced her behavior. So we reinforce behaviors, not people. We reinforce the behavior. I've just reinforced her behavior of coming early. So, on time. So yeah. So do you understand? So when you add something or you give somebody something, so that's reinforcement. That's positive reinforcement. Negative reinforcement is, and the reinforcement means the behavior is going to go up. So any consequence after behavior, and I reinforce it, the behavior is going to go up. Okay? Negative reinforcement. That means I take something away, and the behavior still goes up. Okay? And I have an example here. A child doesn't like to eat, and I give him a plate of food. So I have some protein, I have some rice, and I have some broccoli. And I put it down, and they're crying. The child is crying. So let's say I take away the broccoli from the plate, and the child eats all their food. Okay, so that's an example of, let's say negative reinforcement. If I'm reinforcing eating the food, then they don't want the broccoli. Or I could say, you know what, you only need to eat half of the broccoli instead of the whole thing. And so I'm reinforcing that behavior, okay? So punishment. Now, punishment is anything that's done after a behavior that systematically causes a behavior to go down or even stop. Okay? So some of us, us, you know, we think we're punishing. Okay? And what's your name, ma'am? Ms. Stevens just gave that example, you know, the timeout, the verbal redirection.
The lunchtime, the takeaway is lunchtime,
Okay, so that's punishment. That's negative punishment, where she just gave an example that he behaves in a certain way, and she takes away lunchtime, you know, playtime at lunchtime. That would be negative punishment, and then he stops for a while, right? Okay, all right, so yes. So that's punishment, okay? And then the next thing is positive punishment. Anything I add to it, after a behavior, anything I add after a behavior and the behavior goes down or it stops, that's punishment, okay? So, I know none of us in here spank, right? But if you use spanking as punishment and the behaviors go up, is it really punishment? No. Okay? So behaviors are supposed to go down. And trust me, I've heard it said sometimes, no matter how much I spank this child, he still does whatever. It's not punishment. Okay? And again, you have to find out why they're behaving the way that they're behaving. Okay, so keep that in mind. Okay, so now we're gonna get to something. Okay, so before I work with the child, or when I start working with the child, these 2 things to me are very important. Okay, the pairing and instructional control. And with pairing, that's the process of associating yourself. So you're a teacher, you're a parent, associating yourself with things the child already enjoys. So if you look sometimes in my bag, I would have bubbles and Play-Doh. Children love those things. And so when I first meet them, that's what we're gonna do. And so I had one parent tell me, she's like, I'm paying you to play. But if you're associated with something positive, before you make any demand on the child, before you ask them to pick something up or sit in a chair or do anything like that, play with them. So you have to associate yourself with something positive. Otherwise, they're not going to be so trusting of you, especially the little ones. Okay? So I do this every time, and it's not the first session. Sometimes it takes several sessions. You remember that picture I showed you with the little girl who drew me as her best friend? It took me a month before she even looked in my direction. Okay? To trust you, you have to pair yourself with something positive in order for you to be effective in working with the children. And then the next thing is you have to establish instructional control. So that means that I am such a delight to be around for the child now that any instructions I give them, they're more readily willing to do it. They're more willing to do it because now we have established a rapport and they talk to me. And so we will work together. We would have established instructional control. So that means that the child is responding to you. And this is not a guarantee for the first time you meet a child. Pairing and instructional control is ongoing because the more they learn, the more skills that they have, then you have to continue to reestablish your relationship with them. Okay? So, any questions? Now we can go back to your question. So, I told you about instructional control and I told you about pairing. So now, can you ask your question again?
Yes, my question was, you have a child who throws themselves on the ground, for instance, right? That's their behavior, or refuses to do what you ask them to do. I don't know why. Do I ignore it or try to change their behavior immediately? Do I ignore it for a minute, come back, or what? What do I do?
That depends what kind of relationship you have with the child. Because sometimes if you don't have a good relationship, the more when you try to intervene, sometimes the behavior intensifies. So is this a child that you're familiar with, or is this a child that you would have just met?
It's not like a classroom with a teacher on a daily basis with the child. But what about like once a week in a Sabbath school environment with the child?
Okay. Well, I can tell you again, even I guess with a Sabbath school class, same principle applies. If you would have established yourself as someone reinforcing or a positive stimulus, and you're associated with something that the child likes, then once a week, shouldn't be an issue for you. Okay? I can tell you there are some children that I only see once a week. I only see them once a week. And when my timer goes off to say, okay, the session is over, they start crying. Because they know now that I'm not going to see them again for another week. So I only spend an hour with them once a week. And that's the reaction I get. That could happen too with you. You have to, the child has to trust you, has to feel safe with you in order for you to be able to redirect appropriately.
What if they're coming once a month? They're intermittent. What if they're coming once a month or twice a month?
So when you see them,
their attendance varies. There's no consistency here.
when you see them, you still have to make them feel comfortable. Okay? And that's the only thing I can say. You have to make them feel comfortable.
So you're going to give us some ways that we can make them feel confident.
Sure.
Okay,
I
very
will
good.
try.
Very good.
But I'm saying now you have to figure out, and if it's Sabbath school, there has to be some activity or something that they might be interested in. Whether it's you sing their favorite song more than once. I gave stickers. You know, we get up and jump if the child, something that interests the child in order to get them to associate you or even come into Sabbath school as something that's positive and enjoying. And so you yourself have to be so excited and make coming to Sabbath school, welcoming the children, make coming to Sabbath school the best thing that is going to happen to them for the week, that they can't wait to come back. Or when they do come back, they're so excited, and you really wouldn't have that much problems. But it takes time. Don't think it's just a one-time thing. It takes time. Sorry? There you go. You have to be consistent. There you go. Oh, and I was telling you, sorry, this hair. Now, not everybody likes them, but if you walk around with some bubbles, that's all I have to say. Listen, especially if you work with preschoolers, bubbles and Play-Doh. Pardon me? Okay, Ms. Stevens is saying that even the older kids like bubbles. Listen, I can't wait until it's bubble blowing time for me in my sessions, okay? So, yes.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I just wanted to say
Yes.
that I'm a teacher, and I had a student in my class. I could not get through to him. And so one day I went in, I said, "Do you like Paw Patrol?" He said, "I love Paw Patrol." I said, "You sure you like Paw Patrol?" He said, "I love Ryder." I said, "You think Ryder, if Ryder was to come right now, I think Ryder would have been satisfied with you not doing your work?" He said, "I don't think so, Miss Scott." I said, "How about you do that for Ryder?" I said, "From now on, every time I see you, your name is Ryder. And every time I saw him, I sing, Paw Patrol, Paw Patrol." Listen to me. From then on, he's getting A's in my class. And it made a difference in his life. So it's the approach. Mind you, it took me a while because I had to scratch my head, like, what am I going to do? But you find something, pairing and instructional control, it works.
Yes. And if there's something that we call, there's a reinforcement survey that we would give to the parents sometimes. So sometimes. Because when we play together, then I figure out which toy that this child gravitates to, or what activity this child likes, and then that's the one I keep on the side. And so he will play with the other ones, and then I'll be like, "Oh, is this the school bus you like?" And so you just give it to them. So you sometimes just simply by observing them, you figure out what it is that they like, or what activity or item is reinforcing to them, and that's what you use. And the thing is, you keep that one so that they know when I see you, I'm gonna get that particular thing. So whatever it is, and it's not, and I can't stress this enough, it has to be individualized. You can't assume that all children like the same thing. So you have to approach each child individually. Okay? Any questions? Or we can go on. Okay. So, where are we? So, I got this question here. Is the child spoiled or is it autism? All right. So, now, see that's where I have my board now. Are you going to be my writer?
No, I have to do
Okay. So, question. Now, before we do anything, right, we have to, what we call in behavior analysis, we have to operationalize the behavior, so that when,
You have a writer.
there you go. So when Miss Stevens sees it, she knows that this is what it is. Okay, so let's try and operationalize what is spoiled. So what does a spoiled child looks like? So you can give your answers, and my beautiful writer here would write what spoiled is, because spoiled could be a number of things and it could be different to everybody. So what is spoiled? Because this was a question that was given to me. So how does spoiled look? Anybody? You got it? So let's go. What's
Having your own way.
so having your own way, and
Without being properly.
so not following instructions
Yes.
means having your own way.
Having your own way without being guided properly.
Okay. So having your own way, we may have to operationalize that too. Okay. And what does it mean to be spoiled? Any other things? So having your own way.
Doing things and no one saying not to do it, just letting you have your way.
Okay. Anybody else? Hi. Okay. So listen. So now put a line down here and put tantrum. She just said having a tantrum. And so again, we're gonna have to operationalize what a tantrum is. Because again, a tantrum could mean different things for different children. So it depends. Okay, so we'll come back to tantrum, but this one is having your own way. Oh, she said, yeah, having your own way. This is how spoiled looks. So it's spoiled to the top here. Okay, that's spoiled. Hi.
Everything you ask for, you get.
Okay. Immediately? So that's what you want? Okay, so that's what, okay, getting, okay. Okay,
And being entitled.
sorry. You heard me? That was just for my writer. Okay. She's such a good sport though. Okay, anybody else?
Having no consequences.
No consequences? Okay, so that's it?
Freedom to do whatever you want.
Talking back? Listen, we want them to talk, you know. We want them to talk. Okay, all right, cause I can tell you one thing. Right? I had a parent, and she gets mad with me. Okay, cause she's like, do you know that my baby just say you're so annoying? I said, what? Listen, I put those words together. Okay, so from not talking to calling somebody annoying, I love it. But, pardon me?
They sometimes give you this body language.
Body language. Oh, she said rolling eyes and body language. So sometimes, we want them to talk, but then we have to tell them, you have to show them appropriate ways to talk. So talking back sometimes isn't necessary because we want them to use their words. But that's a good one though. I know what you mean.
But we
Sure.
How about can't take no for an answer?
Oh, yes. So no. Do you know accepting a no is a skill that you have to teach? Oh. Do I need to say it again? Do you know that accepting a no is a skill we teach? Okay. All right. So let's go. Now we're gonna I just put that there because this is just an opportunity for incidental learning. A tantrum. So how does a tantrum look? There you go, you got the mic.
Throwing yourself on the floor.
Okay, so on the word. There you go. Okay, so okay, so throwing yourself on the floor, we call it flopping. Sometimes, you know, they just, like, they have no bones sometimes. Yeah, okay? Okay. Anybody else? How does a tantrum look?
They also make piercing sounds, screaming out loud and abruptly, and they won't stop until they are either given something that they wanted or ready to calm down.
Okay. Great. So what's the next one?
Is walking out your class one? Because they just like,
Elopement, that's what we call, without permission?
yeah.
Okay, so yeah, elopement, that's what we call. You just write us, don't worry about that, we good. Okay. I say the word.
Eloping or elopement?
Yeah.
Is stomping one of
Stomping?
Yes, stomping.
Yes, yes. Remember now, I'm telling you that remember tantrums look different for everyone because I could sit down in a chair, not say a word, and dare you to move me. You understand? So we're just gonna see the thing is we can't mess it up. So that's just so you know. There you go. Okay. Okay. So tantrums look different for every child. So it could be a silent protest. That could be a tantrum. Crying, screaming, that could be a tantrum. Okay? Throwing things, property destruction, those are tantrums, okay? So, but if we focus on being spoiled, right? Now, remember I told you just now that we have to teach accepting. Oh, there's a question over there. Sorry.
They just like to be bored with stuff.
Pardon me?
Children, they just like to be bored with stuff.
Oh, so they like to
You
keep
say,
touching.
leave this chair. Okay, so they leave that chair, and then they see that place. Go on to that place. They say, leave that place. Go on to that place. Always
Okay, so that particular child needs to be constantly moving. Okay, so now we've said all of these things, right? And now we're going to look at the behaviors associated with autism, all right? And they look the same, so it's hard to tell which is which. So let's just always assume that we have to teach a skill. Instead of labeling spoiled, let's say we need to teach a skill, okay? And when we look at it like that, then our attitude towards the child will change and we'll be a little bit more patient and a little kinder. So some of the behaviors associated with autism, that's flapping or playing with your fingers or have to be spinning. So those are some of the things, and a lot of the children do that to either calm themselves, they're anxious, so they do that to relieve maybe a stressful situation when they're in a stressful situation. So that's something to think about. So that's not necessarily them being rude. It's just that they're doing things to try and calm. Now, I'm not saying that's always the case, but when we're thinking about autism, we have to think that there are behaviors that are associated with autism, And we have to teach them certain skills, adaptive skills, replacement behaviors for those inappropriate behaviors that they are exhibiting. Everybody got it? So do I need to read the rest of that slide, or we can go on? So if we look at spoil and we look at behaviors associated with autism, do we know if they're spoiled, or we know that there are some skill deficits that we probably need to teach? Okay? So I put that there so that we can think differently about it. Remember, okay, I'm aware this child has autism. Now I need to accept that this child is gonna exhibit certain maladaptive behaviors, and teaching skills might be warranted. Okay? So we have to think about that when we're dealing with children on the spectrum.
So how do you deal with a child who needs a microphone?
1 second.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
I would like to reiterate that it's a lot of children that are doing stuff, and we would say that they are rude because they have never been diagnosed as autism.
Okay.
But we would say, or we would think, if we don't know any better, that they are acting rude, but like you were saying, they are just acting out because of the autism or whatever, causes them to do that. And then some children are doing so because of something that happened that their parent or their guardian don't even know about it, but they experience it. And so they have no way of expressing themselves, because some of them can't speak or even hear. So they just expressing it in that type of way. But we have a lot of children, I notice, in the Bahamas and other places that people don't know, because a lot of us didn't know about autism before. We would characterize it probably as the person is crazy or other things, or even disrespectful. But then it was really autism, because we are now learning about it. And so we have to bring ourselves as parents and guardians and caregivers to try and to be warm and to these people or these persons, so that they can live more better in life by us understanding what is going on here, what you are teaching. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for your input. Okay. Any more? So you had a question, Ms. Stevens?
The hitting and the biting, like,
What do you do with a child that hits and bites other children? Because that happens. They hit.
I get hit and bite. It happens, but like I say, it's a matter of training. Okay, so if a child for 3 years or so is able to is allowed to hit or bite, after some discomfort or being told no, or let's say a number of reasons, they don't know any better. Sometimes when the parents are frustrated, I don't want to say it, but that's the reality. So when parents are frustrated, they spank the children. Okay? So what are you teaching? You're teaching them that when they're frustrated, you hit. Okay? And so when a child takes a toy, or they're told no, what are they gonna do? Sometimes you have to model the behavior you wanna see. Okay? So I'm not saying that is always the case, but sometimes, that's our reality. That, I come here. They don't come, you go to them and you spank them. So if you took all of that energy to go to them and spank them, why couldn't you take that same energy, go to them, take them by the hand, bring them back to where you were and say, when I call you, I expect for you to come. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Oh.
But if you are frustrated, some persons, well, the oldest that I would say would use a spike on the hand to get the child's attention. So I'm thinking that's a different way of dealing with it. It's something for us to really think about.
Does the
Changing.
child have a name?
Yes.
Call their name, get their attention.
Okay.
You understand? Now listen, I'm not telling you how to parent. I'm not telling anyone how to parent. But sometimes, if you find an alternate way to do something other than hitting, then that might make a difference. So I'm just saying, but I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just saying. Okay.
Okay, so
Yes.
I want to make a comment. I just want to share something I'm guilty of, but I ask forgiveness for it. I worked, one of my co-workers
Yes.
decided to bring his son, who I've never met, and leave him in the office with my assistant. However, this young man, he's about 8 or 9, he wouldn't stop moving and doing things and touching things, right? Now, when I saw Mr. I might say, you know, a little harsh to him, sit down or whatever, and something like that, I feel differently because after his father spoke with me and I spoke with his father, I get to find out that the boy was autistic. Now, I say that to say this. So I found myself guilty of that, and so I asked forgiveness for that because I was wrong in many ways, but I didn't know. So that's my excuse. Okay? Now, what I suggest, we have a school, and she also deals with adolescents in Johnson Park. All right? A lot of parents, guardians don't like to hear your child moves a lot and stuff like that. Shouldn't you be assessed? Somebody have to be assessed? They jump up and say, my child ain't crazy. You trying to tell my child crazy. We need to know, like I was telling my wife earlier, the first time we had this meeting by Johnson Park, we need to ask these parents just simple questions. It's not to bring the child down on a lower level than other children, but if the child don't have any special needs, we need to know about it. They active, whatever, stuff like that. Because if you don't tell us, we don't know how to deal with it. We are just, someone might mistreat the child, beat them, not knowing that the child is not ready or beaten because they don't quite understand what's going on around them most days because they're autistic, you know? So I'll say to any of you who have a school or deal with children in school, and especially if it's a new child entering your environment, find out from the parents, look here, is there anything I need to know about this child? That way, right away, you could begin to help that child forward more better.
Oh, very good point, thank you. And there's a way to ask. You have an admissions form, right? So on that admissions form, that's where you can put that information. I'm gonna put myself on timeout soon for not keeping the mic where it needs to be.
But some people don't want to do that because they're denial. They would lie on the form and say no.
Can I say something to you? The diagnosis of autism, where I was trained, that's a medical diagnosis. It's a psychological diagnosis. And where I was trained, medical information is private. And parents give out that information the way they want to. Okay? Because if you have any other disease, you don't want it out there that you have certain things, you know, people would treat you differently. And it has been my experience, and some parents are honest.
But I didn't know that.
No, I don't know what it is.
You get what I did.
I know what it is in the Bahamas, but where I was trained, you know, it's a psychological diagnosis, and those diagnoses are considered medical and private, and so parents tell it, disseminate that information the way they want to. And another thing is, and over here, in my experience, what I've realized is when some parents are honest about their child's diagnosis, school fee goes up 50%. Does the child take up more space than the others? 50% more space? Do they really get more time? Do they really get more attention? Okay.
They demand it.
Okay.
They demand it.
But I'm just telling you what has happened in my experience with having to work with parents, and then in some cases too, once the school hears that a child has a diagnosis, then they're like, okay, we'll take your child, but they need to come to school with an aid. Okay? So there's school fee, and then they're paying for someone to come to school, to be in a school that the school said, we could take them. Okay? So that's something to think about. Okay.
We have a question online. It's saying, good afternoon. How do you deal with a crying child when they come to church? You'll try to give them candy, your phone, or something to help them. I guess they want to know what to do.
Why is the child crying? No. Is the child hungry? Did the child have a good night's rest? Did they have a hectic morning and so they need a little bit of extra time? Does the child like coming to that particular activity at church? So all of those things you have to figure out first before we can tell you why the child crying. Because and maybe I don't eat candy. Believe it or not, some children don't like candy. So you have to find out these things before you can say, okay, this is it. And I need to make a disclaimer. I don't know what the situation is, so I have to speak very generally, and I cannot give specifics as to say, okay, you need to do this, because I don't know the situation or the reason, what's going on, why the child might be crying. Child could be getting sick, and we don't know.
I guess, good afternoon, everyone.
I just wanted to say something to the gentleman who made the comment. As educators, we have been taught we have to be very careful. We cannot diagnose anyone because we do not have that ability. We haven't had the training, and so we have to say to the parent, I am noticing this. I am observing this, and we have to make notes about what we are seeing and what we have done also, because you just don't observe and then you don't do anything.
Documents.
Yes, so we definitely have to document. What we end up doing, we normally invite the parent in and we have a discussion. And we say what it is we're seeing. And we have worked with Ms. Joy before, and we have had the privilege of actually saying to the parent, listen, we're gonna call in someone who can help you, because this is out of what we can do. We cannot do anything else. And some of them, they have been very receptive. Some of them, we've had to talk to them sternly because, of course, before coming to school, they would give the child a good beating. And the child, of course, maybe for the first 2 or 3 hours, you know, they would behave, and then of course it will start all over again. But it's at that point we call in persons like Miss Joy to come in and talk to our parents and let them know what is happening, what we're observing, what we're seeing. And some of them, they're very, it's like, no, that's not my child, that's not happening. And then they will come back once you get them to say, okay, here is a logbook. We want you to keep this logbook at home and come back and share with us. And then once they notice the same thing, certain behavior they're looking for, is like a checklist. They will come back in and they'll say, oh, what you're saying is right. And that is when we're actually able to have a good discussion and actually map the way going forward to help the child.
All right, thanks. And two, another thing, and I have seen it happen, and the parent was like, so Miss Joy, what should I do? Where the teacher asked the parent when she did school pickup, did your child take his medication today? That should never happen. That is very insulting. So she was like, what should I do? I said, ma'am, I cannot tell you what to do. You would have to make a decision in the best interest of your child. And so those are the things that we need to be aware of, especially those who are educators. Because what I've seen happening too, because we know that the diagnosis of autism is on the rise. If a child doesn't talk as much as the other children, they're sending the child to be tested. If a child is at a certain age and let's say they're not potty trained, they're sending the child to be tested. And that might not necessarily mean that the child is on the spectrum. So as teachers or as educators, you need to be a little bit more tactful, because I would tell people, I don't diagnose, but you can go and speak with your pediatrician to make sure that your child is on schedule for meeting certain milestones. So if you tell them that, because the pediatrician is keeping a record of what your child is doing. So if your child's pediatrician, I'm talking about the younger children, if your child's pediatrician advises that you go get testing, then you go get testing. Because they would have been with your child from birth until whatever age they are, okay? So you say, I'm not saying this, I'm not saying that. When was the last, and you can go to your pediatrician for a well baby checkup to make sure that certain things are happening. So I would say, and my advice would be, you recommend or you refer to someone who is qualified to give a diagnosis. Okay? It's 6:17. Are we gonna keep going? Okay, so it's 6:17, so this is what we're gonna do. Everybody stand up. And this is what I do in my sessions, okay? Everybody stand up. Yeah, that's fine. What you want me to do? You okay with what you want me to do? You okay? Everybody up? Well, Miss Stevens, you got leg issues. You see? You see? So then you say, Miss Joy, I can't stand. Okay? So you can sit down. So, see, you see how that is? Okay, so I assume.
Mike, Miss Joy.
Pardon me?
Mike.
Oh, sorry. I assumed everybody could stand. You see how it is? So, I'm telling you what not to assume. Okay? So let's go. Clap your hands. Let you know good. Rub your tummy. Shrug your shoulders. Arms up over your head. Wiggle your fingers. All right. What's your name? Everybody shout out. What's your name? There you go. Okay. Raise your hand. Pat yourself on the back. Good job. Good listening. Good following instructions. Okay, we can sit back down. Okay? You see how you reinforce listening? Okay, you be very specific. Good listening. Good following instructions. Oh, I like the way you did this. So, okay, let's go on. Everybody good, right? You don't have any questions. And I'm holding up the mic.
Thank you.
I could need a sticker for that. Okay.
So Ms. Joy,
There's a sticker book right there. Right there.
so you did that exercise just now and it was really good, but I kind of did not follow instructions, right?
Oh.
And now, so going piggybacking, is it possible that sometimes when you give an instruction to a child, that the child is just not capable of following that instruction because of motor coordination issues, being able to process information, things of that sort? Can you elaborate on that, please?
Like I said, we cannot assume that a child knows or is able to do certain things. For motor movements and all that, I don't deal with it, so you're the best one to deal with that. So, motor coordination and all of that, that's it. We teach imitation, okay? So, the best way, to pick up on social cues is for us to model behaviors and for the child to be able to imitate certain behaviors. Now, like I said, I don't deal with coordination, I don't deal with motor anything, I'm gonna deal with imitation, okay? So if I put my hands in the air, can you put your hands in the air? And if you can't put your hands in the air, then, I would show you, help you up with the elbow. Okay, that's just what I mean by putting your hand in the air. So that's what I deal when we deal with social cues, because that's how we learn. We learn, we imitate certain sounds, certain movements by the people around us. Okay, does that answer your question? Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
I'm a service school teacher.
Hi.
All right, so coming into a room within maybe the first time you meet a child, maybe for that first hour, you will notice something different, maybe a 2-week or a 3-week. When you notice that different, before saying this is the condition or that is the condition, can you give me some tips in terms of approach, or you start? Because you have said to yourself already, something is different about this child. Can you say, oh, I could start approaching this child too?
How do you, let me see if I understand the question. How would you approach a child if you notice that the child is not behaving like the other children?
Right.
You would welcome them the same way you would welcome any other child. Because at the end of the day, children with special needs need the same thing or require the same attention, the same interaction with any other child. So just because you think, okay, this child is behaving differently, that doesn't mean that you cannot engage the child. So if, you're doing building blocks or coloring, then there's an expectation that, even though this child is different, he still needs a paper to color. He still needs some crayons. So you try not to treat them any differently than you would any other child. Okay? Because you're not trying to single them out because they, and I'm going to put this in quotes, look different or they behave differently. So the same thing is that you would do the same thing, but if you're asking the other children to say, okay, color the whole picture or color inside the lines, that child might very well not be able to do that. So whatever that child does, it's just as beautiful as what the other children do. Until he learns how to do it or make an approximation of what the other children are doing. Okay?
So we're saying then, when we notice this unusual behavior, we are not going to diagnose what it is, because we don't know what it is.
We don't know.
So consistently, you have this child, how do you go about after a month, 2 months, 3 months, continuously? How do you go about it? What do you do? What do you begin to change? Who do you talk to?
So, again, let me see if I understand your question. So this is a child that comes into your Sabbath school, correct? And after a month, the child is behaving differently. Is the child disrupting Sabbath school?
Let's say it's a disruption.
I'm sorry?
Let's say it's a disruption. Let's say the child is disrupting. The first week you notice it. A month pass continuously. 2 months, 3 months. How do you go about it after that?
And the child is not always in Sabbath school?
Always in Sabbath school.
The child is always in Sabbath school. Then that's up to you now to show them what's expected. But you have to do it in a gentle way. Okay? So if, you need the child to sit down, let's say, if the, standing up and walking around is the child being disrupted, then if for 1 minute that child decides, I'm going to sit down, and they sit down for 1 minute, then that's when you give them a lot of attention for sitting. Okay? You reinforce the behavior you want to see. And if for whatever reason, let's say he sits down, then if you know that he has to walk about, then you let everybody get up and walk around the room, just to give him a break, to say, okay, everybody's gonna walk around too, okay? So you don't wanna just single him out. And like I said, whatever behavior he's doing that's appropriate, that's the behavior you make a big fuss about, and everything else, let's just try to redirect, okay? Now, again, I'm speaking in general. I don't know what the issue is, but this is just a general answer.
So, I got what you said to his question just now, right, that you would let the other children probably get up and walk or move to accommodate him, but the child, not to let them feel any different. But if it's a child who never sits down for not even 1 minute, from they reach, they are disruptive, the guardian is there with the child, can't help in any way to control this child. What do you continue to do? Because in some form, you have to get the lesson out, you have to get the lesson across, so you can't just keep letting the whole class move, the whole Sabbath school. So what do you do? And do you ever, as a Sabbath school teacher, approach the parent or the guardian and ask or bring it to their attention that somehow, I don't know, say something? Do you ever approach and say something or ask something or continue week after week to allow this disruption to continue? Because that's what we have been doing, because we don't know what else to do at this point.
So you've spoken to the parent?
No, we haven't, because we don't know how to approach it. The guardian is there every week with the child. So we don't know how to approach it, so we've never said anything. So it just continues to happen week after week. And with the guardian sometimes trying to control the child, that's another disruption.
Exactly. So listen, I'm smiling because in my mind I'm thinking, okay, maybe Sabbath school might be the parents' respite care, where, okay, I just show up and let them take care of them because I need a break. That might be, no, I know that's what I would do. I mean, I'm just, and you know what? I trust these people at church, so my child is okay. But the thing is, like I say, it is you have to train the child, and if, pardon me. Yes, you have to teach them. You know, like I said, you make a fuss about the behavior you want to see. Okay? So even and that's where reinforces maybe there should be a special seat and you find out what the child likes, right? And it could be a special toy. I wouldn't say give them food because you know you're in church. So you get a special toy or something and put that in that seat. And as long as that child stays in that seat, they can hold the toy. You get up out of your seat, you have to give me the toy, you can't walk around with the toy. And so it's something like that you would have to do. Or if bubbles are allowed, anytime that child sits down, you blow some bubbles for the whole class. Okay? And trust me, I tell you it works because one time I went to a school and that's how the child that I worked with made friends. Because when the child and I, we would go out to recess and they didn't have any friends, but I would blow bubbles. And so all the children would come and pop the bubbles with the child. So they then associated this child with something good, something fun. And so they treated the child a little kinder. Because now, okay, listen, because of this child, we now have bubbles. Okay? So you have to try and do anything that's rewarding for the child in order to get them to behave appropriately. Okay? All right. We can go on. Where are we now? Okay. So we're on this one, right? So how should I handle an out-of-control child? Again, when we use these terms, out of control, it's negative. And what does out of control look like? And that's what we have to think about when we're saying out of control. And we're not handling or managing the child. We're managing or taking care of the behavior. Okay? Now, remember, and I hear a lot of people say, God hates sin, but he loves the sinner. So that's the way you have to look at it. That makes sense, right? Yeah. Okay. So that's how you have to look at it. You know, you're not trying to manage the child. You're just trying to teach them new behaviors or, appropriate behaviors. And sometimes you have to sit down and think, you know, what behaviors are appropriate for this setting. And if you're going to punish certain behaviors, you have to think about it. Because if you stop a behavior, then what happens if the child is in another situation and then they need those skills for another situation, but yet, you know, certain behaviors were punished. So you have to be careful. So, like I said, there are inappropriate behaviors. There are no bad behaviors. So, for any particular settings, there are inappropriate behaviors. And so you don't want to go around trying to punish certain behaviors or stop certain behaviors, because in one situation, it might not work. But in another situation, they might need those skills in order to do something else. Okay? Okay. Any questions? We can go on. All right. I say 10 more minutes, and then we can call it a day. Okay, we're on the next one. Okay, and another question is, should I ignore them? And I was assuming that the question was asking, should I ignore the child or should I ignore the behavior? And again, in my experience, I have noticed that if a child behaves inappropriately, a lot of times they're ignored. And we can't ignore the child, or we shouldn't ignore the child. That there are certain behaviors that we should ignore. And those behaviors that we ignore should only be for behaviors that are attention seeking. So, if I'm tapping with the pencil to try and get your attention, then I would ignore that, because that behavior of tapping the pencil is probably maintained by your attention. Okay, so if the behavior is dangerous and involves property destruction, then we do not ignore that. Okay? We have to block the response or block what they're doing and redirect. And sometimes you might have to move them out of the environment where the inappropriate behavior is happening and take them to a calmer, quieter environment and try to redirect. But again, once you're doing that, you do not talk about the behavior they're exhibiting while they're exhibiting it, because you're just bringing attention to it. So once the behavior subsides, then you can talk about it. So don't talk about it while they're exhibiting it. Because I've seen it before where a parent was like, stop crying. And the minute they say stop crying, the child screams and cries louder. And then they start with the chest moving and all of that stuff, and the behavior intensifies. So you have to be careful what behaviors you're reinforcing. And again, I'm saying you're ignoring behaviors, not the children, okay? And you're only ignoring those behaviors that are maintained by attention-seeking behaviors. Yes?
A quick question.
Sure.
Okay, you have a particular student. She's very active, so she has 1,000,002 questions before you get to finish your official lesson. This is in church now, not in school. And she is just so eager to understand and to know that she doesn't understand that she keeps interrupting the lesson. You're not trying to ignore her, but how do you deal with a child like that? She's just eager. Oh, Miss Dean, did you say that? Oh, this is what you meant? And you don't want to ignore her to the point, but then you need to finish. You have a certain set time to do certain things. So how do you deal with an overactive questioner, I would say?
So, you might have to teach her to wait. Do you know teaching a child to wait is a skill? Have you used the timer?
Okay, we've tried where when she comes in, I know she's gonna have questions. Okay, so that's our time. That's like a 2-minute, 3-minute, 4-minute, or get all your questions out, get all of your questions out. But you find that once the lesson has started, she just expands. And I understand she's being very inquisitive, but then at some point you gotta stop it, you gotta put it on pause so you can get to the rest of what you have to do. If you understand.
I understand.
It's a challenge. It's a challenge.
Okay, so there are two, what's the audio visual thing?
Carisha?
There you go. Hi. Can we go to slide 19? Okay. Yeah, either one, that's fine. That one there. Okay, that one is, okay. So I'm showing you the blue one. That's a token board. Okay? And so you can give that to her. And her reward, whatever reward you want to give her, right? And you can give her, if you finish the lesson, like 2 minutes, and you would put a check mark or a star or something, and you can say, good, no, but listen, you could be talking, and when she's quiet, you go and you give her a sticker and you say, oh, I like how you're listening, good listening, okay? And then after another 2 minutes, and she is still waiting and somebody else asks a question, then you go to her and you say, oh, thank you for letting somebody else ask a question. And then if another 2 minutes goes by and she hasn't asked a question, oh, I like how you're waiting for question time. You understand? So that you gotta reinforce the behavior you want to see. So if she's sitting down there quietly, then, oh, listen, and she could just be quiet for half a second, but she's quiet, there you go. Okay? All right. Any other questions? No questions? Okay, so yes, and you can use that, and that could be a token board just for her. So you could individualize it if you needed to. Okay? All right. Okay, so we'll go for 5 more minutes, and then we call it a day. Okay. So nobody else has any more questions, right? Okay. So now I'm going to jump through since they're looking for practical ways. So I threw this one in there of social stories. Sometimes, remember again, we're here, you have to teach a skill, and one of the questions was, how do I manage a child? I think it was, hold on. Managing social awareness or missed cues. So the child isn't aware of certain social cues or how to behave appropriately in certain environments. And I found a social story about personal space, because a lot of the children I work with do not know what personal space means, okay? Because they will come up close and they'll talk. Some will come, the little babies will come and they want to sit on your lap and all of that stuff. And I'm constantly telling them, personal space, personal space. Because once they get older, then they have to know what it is to maintain, certain social cues, and personal space is one of them. So the way you can do it is to have a story. My friends don't like when I'm up too close, and you might not be able to see it clearly, but there are two people, this close. And so we have to tell them, okay, this is not how we talk. This is how friends don't talk. Or my friends don't like hugs. So they like hugs, but I have to ask my friends for a hug, because if you have to go in for a hug, then you're too close. So you always ask permission to enter somebody's personal space. So you can use personal space like that, because that was one of the questions. And I worked with a 10-year-old girl, and she used to be right here. I'm talking to her, and she's right here. So I would say to her, remember what I told you, if I can touch you, when I put my hands out, you're too close. So you have to teach personal. We cannot assume that a child on the spectrum is paying attention to us and they're picking up cues, or we're modeling behaviors for them to see. We have to be deliberate in how we teach them. We cannot assume that they're going to do certain things because everybody else is doing it, okay? Or all the other children are doing it. All right, and so the last thing I'm going to leave you with then. Is it this one? I think one of the questions was, that's number 22, I think it is, right? one of the questions is, how do we improve, or how do we get the church to be more sensitive and aware of dealing with those children on the spectrum? And one of the things you're doing is what we're doing now. We're having a discussion. We invite other professionals to come and talk. I know when a child is diagnosed with autism, it's usually the multidisciplinary approach where speech therapy is suggested, occupational therapy is suggested, and ABA therapy is suggested. And all of them have different functions in helping the child thrive, okay? So maybe today it's me, tomorrow it's an occupational therapist, another time it might be a speech therapist, but all of us work together to help improve the lives of the life of the child, okay? And sometimes, I think the last one you did, there was a parent who shared her testimony. So it's good to have or hear stories from parents who are dealing with children, or who are living with children on the spectrum, or even teachers who are working with children in the spectrum. So anytime you can get the opinion or the expertise of somebody who works with them, then that's a good opportunity, okay? The next thing we need to do is, we could even talk to our children. And I'll tell you, I went to school, and there was a little boy, and he was disruptive, and he would do all of these things. So the teacher had a discussion with the children, and so she said, okay, Frank is here, and sometimes he needs a little extra help. So if he starts making noises, I want you to just keep looking at me, okay? And then she told him to, she said, okay, and when it's time to line up, or when it's time to do this, he's gonna need some help getting on the line, or he's gonna need help with putting this away. And every time I went there, somebody else, all of the other children, they would help him out. So we even have to make our children aware that there are other children who are different. And so they might need their help, and the children were good about it. Sometimes children only reflect the attitudes of the adults. And so if we have caring, kind, compassionate adults, then our children would do the same thing, okay? And what's the last one? The last thing I have here, the last one is to empower people to be advocates for the children, these children who are on the spectrum. It's 26. So to be advocate for those children who are on the spectrum. And I know I'm not sure if all of you have heard about, inclusion, but there was a forum about inclusion, and you just want the children to be able to participate in settings with their peers, with children who look like them, who they're the same age, okay? And sometimes they learn more from other children than we can teach them sometimes. So it's good to have them around other children where they would learn to play appropriately, or they'll learn to do other things appropriately. So, be an advocate for those children you come in contact with, okay? All right, thank you for your attention. Any other questions? We're good? All right, thank you for listening to me. Am I giving you need the mic? Oh, I turned it off.
I want to invite you at this time just to stand with me as we have the closing prayer. Loving Father in heaven, thank you so very much for what you have done for us this evening, and thank you for those who have attended this wonderful seminar. We pray now, Lord, that you will help each one of us to implement that which we have learned, and may we be successful in helping these little ones to grow to be more like you, we ask. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. At this time, let me see just a minute. Ms. Joy, on behalf of the South Bahamas Conference and the Charms Ministries director and her team, we want to say thank you for sharing these wonderful people, and may God bless you.
Oh, thank you. Oh. I love it. There you go. There you go. You got it. Yeah, there you go. See, and now you breathe. And you say yes to you again. Thank you.
Thank you to everyone who would have showed up. And yes, as the executive secretary said, yes, on behalf of the CHAM department, we are thankful for your support. Thank you for showing up and wanting to learn so much more about this very important awareness and acceptance. What do you call this? Topic? Yes, topic. Because we need to also know that we need to be sensitive in the things we say and how we say it. Because it's so easy to use words that are offensive and words that we sometimes don't understand how it hurts. So sometimes we use the word like, oh, we're normal, like using the word normal.
We might be the strange ones.
Yes.
And they might be the normal ones, because they're smarter than all of us.
I agree. I have had interactions with kids who are on the spectrum, and I look at them with admiration because the way their mind processes information, I'm like, you're smarter than me.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So I'm really thankful that we, in the month of April, what of which we know it's autism awareness. And so we were very deliberate, the CHAM department of the South Bahamas Conference, about bringing more attention to this very important and needed area of discussion. So thank you to the CHAM directors who are here, the Sabbath school teachers who are here, and the non-Adventists who are here, the educators that are here, because the thing is, we can't be selfish with education. We can't be selfish about awareness. And so all of us, we might not interact with the exact child, but all of us are planting seeds, all of us are influencing, all of us are inspiring, some of us could be doing the complete opposite of it sometimes because we aren't aware. So I'm thankful, Miss Joy. I think she has the right name. She smiles a lot. She has the right name for that fits you so well. So thank you so much for the time and the information that you've shared with us. And thank you again to all of you for showing up. And my prayer is that something that we've learned here today, that we can put it into practice. Because every action has a reaction. Something that you've learned here today will change your approach and your interaction with a child who desperately just wants you to understand them. So thank you once more, and on behalf of Aunt Cindy and I, thank you so much. Thank you to our entitled writer.
Our writer extraordinaire.
Our writer extraordinaire.
There you
So just
go.
thank you to all of you, and be blessed. Toodles.
Thank you to you online.